For many years, I was something of a drifter. I made a living as a photographer, and I used the advent of the internet to my advantage, spending my life travelling Australia, looking for the perfect shot, and selling the prints online or at local craft markets on the road. It was a surprisingly lucrative way to live. I suppose because I didn't really have a mortgage or any rent to pay. By around 2016, I started to settle down a bit. I met a great girl, bought a house and a studio in Brisbane, and my big trips were limited to a few times a year. So I spent a lot more time poking around the southeast of Queensland, looking for new shots. That's how I came across the town that almost cost me my life, and made me seriously consider settling down into a nice, safe life. Right now, in Australia at least, the town of Allies Creek is going somewhat viral on social media because the entire town is up for sale. A dozen iconic Queenslander homes, various town buildings, a dam stocked with fish, and all for $500,000. Truthfully, it's been for sale for a while, but a recent price drop has made it a popular weird news story. It seems like a great deal in many ways, if that's your sort of thing. It's much cheaper than the average home in Brisbane. But please, for your own safety, don't buy the town. Don't even go there. Allies Creek was built to service 3 local sawmills, but as the logging industry wound down, so did the town itself. It was bought by a couple sometime prior to 2015, with plans to turn it into a country retreat. But the husband died not long after, and his wife has been attempting to sell it ever since. There are, allegedly, 4 houses which have tenants, but I don't believe anyone actually lives there anymore. I heard about the town not long after the owner's passing. I had just settled into life in Brisbane, and I was looking for unique photo opportunities in the area when someone told me about this abandoned town. It seemed like a fantastic idea. There is this eerie feel to abandoned towns that comes through beautifully in a photograph. A sense of decay and desolation as nature slowly reclaims the place. And I could do it in a weekend, because Allies Creek is just under 4 hours drive from the state capital. The town is barely a dot on the map, so much so that if you enter it in Google Maps, you only come up with a point at either end of the Allies Creek Road. Have you ever looked at a map and noticed all the seemingly dead space between highways? Well, Allies Creek is smack bang in the middle of that dead space, roughly between Dalby and Gayunda. It's achingly remote, something I was all too aware of as I rolled the camper van over the hill and down into town late on a Friday night. The owner told me that I was welcome to use any of the non-tenanted houses, but none of them were locked, and even way out here I was a bit concerned about safety. Abandoned towns tend to attract various people, and a lot of them are not the kind you'd want to meet in the middle of the night. I pretty much went straight to sleep that first night. I remember hearing a few sounds in a kind of half-asleep state, but I just put it down to animals, or one of the tenants. It's not like the town is hugely spread out. And apparently, a couple of these guys worked quite a way away and kept strange hours, so I barely woke up enough to worry about it. I rose with the sun on Saturday, eager to capture the place in the lonely light of dawn. I've always felt that first kiss of the sun in the morning accentuates the feeling of isolation. Like the expectation of life in a particular place is more starkly contrasted as the sun rises and nothing changes. No one is waking up, no one heading off to work, no mail deliveries, no shops opening for the day. The sheer absence of all that stuff we expect to happen as the day breaks seems to make a place seem all the more lonely to me. And I think that feeling comes across well in a photo. After a very quick but very awful instant coffee, I grabbed my gear and set out to wander. I was surprised by the condition of the old Queenslanders. I had expected more dilapidation, but they were in surprisingly good nick. Someone had obviously been tending to them on and off. In many ways, I think that made my photos better. As if all the people in town had just suddenly vanished a few weeks ago, and nature had just started reclaiming the place. To one side of Allies Creek is thick bushland, part of a series of national forests. Backed up against this bush is the town dam, where I found the rusting hull of a boat resting in the reeds, and the long-forgotten corpse of an ancient Holden ute backed up to a crumbling boat shed. The scene made for some beautiful shots, but the place itself had this unpleasant feel to it. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched from all angles. Like 1,000 predatory eyes were fixed on me from every direction. It seemed to abate as I walked back towards the closest sawmill though, and I put it down to simply having the creeps in a genuinely creepy place. The sawmill was much older and more run down than the rest of Allies Creek, an eclectic combination of the 1890s and the 1980s. It was dusty, full of cobwebs and rust, and just absolutely fantastic. I spent a couple of hours just exploring it, snapping shots of everything I could, and breathing in decades of history. It was after lunchtime by the time I ventured back out into the sunlight, and, blinking, I finally realized why I found the place so creepy. It was completely silent. Obviously, it was a largely abandoned town, and I hadn't seen any sign of the tenants, so I presumed I was alone. But there were no birds or any other animals making any noise at all. It was utterly quiet. While that was creepy, I wasn't too worried. I've been in a lot of isolated places, and because of that isolation, there is often not a lot of wildlife around at any one time. It's not as unusual for nature to be silent as horror stories might have you believe, so I shrugged it off, and I trudged back to the camper to grab some lunch. The silence was finally broken as I ate, parked in my camper on the uphill side of town looking down into the thick bush. From that general area came an odd call, a kind of coughing bark that sounded off 5 times and then fell silent again. after the still morning, it did startle me. But it sounded like maybe a possum or a koala, so I quickly calmed down. For the rest of the afternoon, I poked around the old houses, returning to the camper maybe an hour before sunset. I had parked with a vantage over the town, and I wanted to get some shots as the sun went down and night claimed what nature had yet to. Not long after the sun sank into the night sky, I heard that same sound again. Closer this time. It seemed to be coming from down near the dam, and this time it made me sit right up in bed. Where before I'd thought that it might be a possum or a koala, this was much too loud, reverberating off the hillside. Even more concerning were the responses, although they sounded further away. Whatever was out there wasn't alone, and I most certainly was. Within a few minutes, those strange calls were sounding off all around the town. Whatever was out there had Allies Creek ringed in, and something in me was screaming that this was not good. Normally, I enjoy the isolation of secluded places, but in Allies Creek, I felt very exposed and alone. I decided to drive down to the tenanted area, see if anybody was home, hopefully to explain what the strange sounds were, or at the very least, assure me that someone else was around. I could still sleep in the camper, but it would be nice to at least know I wasn't completely alone out there. The first house was dark and locked up, so I didn't even bother. The next two had lights on in the window or two, but all the curtains were drawn, and there were no cars in sight. Still, that didn't mean they were empty, so I parked between them and cautiously got out of the van. As I very carefully ascended the stairs to the first place, I felt like I heard something move just at the end of the street, where the grassland intersected with the bush. I hurried up the stairs and I knocked on the door, only to find that it was already ajar. The dim light spilling out from inside the house showed that the jamb was splintered, and suddenly my heart rate went through the roof. "Hello?" I called in a breathy whisper. "Is anyone there?" With no response, I pushed open the door, and I was immediately greeted by a foul odor. Peering further into the house, I saw a dark stain on the lino, and to my horror, a human arm spilling out of the door. Bile rose in my throat, and I raced back out the front door, aiming to get in the van and get the hell out of there as fast as I could. As I ran down towards the driver's side door, though, there was a loud coughing sound immediately to my left. I practically skidded to a halt and saw a huge shadow slink around the corner of the house. Without really thinking, I sprinted towards the other house to the right, risking another gruesome discovery, but unable to bring myself to run even slightly towards that shadow. This house, mercifully, was unlocked, and I slammed the door behind me, driving home the deadbolt. Outside, those barking sounds rose in intensity, seemingly coming from all around the house. I didn't even think about what I might find. I just ran through the kitchen and bolted the back door too. Thank God all those old Queenslanders are built almost identically, with at least something of a barrier between me and whatever cast that shadow. I took stock of my situation. Outside, I could hear a cacophony of calls and the movement of some heavy bodies. Inside, I had light, but otherwise, the place looked long abandoned. At least there were no mangled bodies, though. Remembering the splintered door of the previous house, I barricaded the back door with the heavy old steel fridge and flipped the kitchen table against the inside door leading to the hall, jamming the legs in as best I could. I had to trust that whatever was out there didn't understand windows, as the door was smashed in at the last place, but all the glass was intact. Then, against every screaming instinct, I switched off the light. For a moment, it was unreasonably dark as my eyes adjusted to the sudden gloom. The clear light of the moon filtered through the lace curtains quickly enough, and I hunkered down against the cabinet, hopefully out of sight of anyone or anything looking in the window. My heart pounding in my ears, I listened closely to the unnatural sounds outside, straining for any sign that I may have been discovered. Given the number of barks, I didn't think I would have the chance of making it to the van. There was nothing to do but wait and hope. Sitting there like that, hiding from God knows what, was interminable. The creatures, and I had to assume that's what they were, showed no sign of letting up, and the night ticked by at an absolute crawl, punctuated by the horrifying coughs and barks. At some stage, something stomped up the stairs at the back of the house, and my heart froze in my chest. I could hear it shuffling around on the patio, sniffing at the wall and the kitchen door. Part of me wanted to try and crawl into a cupboard just to make myself as small and as unobtrusive as possible. But I knew that I might wind up making a racket, and that could prove fatal. Instead, I decided to do something utterly mad. I slowly stood up and looked out the window. I suppose it was an overwhelming sense of curiosity, coupled with the idea that maybe all of this was completely explainable if I could just see what I was dealing with. Maybe it would be less terrifying if I knew what was outside. Unfortunately, the opposite was true. The things I saw out there in the moonlight were so terrifying that I'm surprised I didn't pass out. On the back patio was an animal that almost looked like a dog, but much, much bigger. It would have been well over 1.5 meters at the shoulder, and probably the length of a 3-seater couch. This thing was massive and strong. Muscles knotted under hairless skin as it rooted around near the door, and huge claws splayed out on the hardwood patio. It almost looked as though the forepaws were flexible enough to function as hands. I never got a detailed look at the head, which was down below the window somewhere, because I sat down pretty quickly when I saw 3 or 4 more outlined in the moonlit backyard, playing with what looked an awful lot like a human skull. Eventually, the one at the door gave up, but the calls they made continued through the night. I have no idea how I survived mentally. It seemed like I barricaded myself in well enough, but the sheer terror of that experience, it was enough to send a person over the edge. Still, somehow, I managed to keep it together. And as the night faded, so too did the coughs and barks. I gave it a good half an hour after the first rays of sunlight before sprinting to the van and peeling out of town at about 4 times the speed limit. I didn't stop until I reached a rest area about 100 k's away, where I pulled over and promptly collapsed from the exhaustion of it all. To this very day, I've never told a soul about what happened in Allies Creek. People died there, and there's never been any mention of it anywhere. And now, the place is for sale, and I can't help but wonder how much the owner knows about the town. It seems like someone out there must know something about what's going on, and about what lurks in the thick bushland near the town. I decided the best course of action would be to pretend nothing happened. To pretend that I drove into town, spent the daylight hours, and left again. So I never mentioned what happened. I just sold some photos and moved on as much as I could. But seeing that ad shared all over social media, that chilled me. Someone, somewhere, is going to buy that place and walk into a death trap. So please, take this warning seriously. No matter how cool it sounds to own a town, no matter how good the deal is, please, please, stay away from Allies Creek.